Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Thursday, the 31st day of July, 2025. And like always, important stories keep coming across the wire, so let's get to them. First of all, from the Times of Israel, this makes sense. U.S. and Israel are now aligning on a comprehensive Gaza plan, including release of all hostages, not a partial ceasefire. They've had enough of Hamas, it seems. And our second story, this is from Jerusalem Post. Hamas cut off contact, escalation in Gaza likely unavoidable. Not likely unavoidable, it is unavoidable. And then here's a great story from Breitbart. Trump slaps sanctions on the Palestinian Authority, blocks officials from traveling to UN for Palestinian state. This is wonderful. That's, again, a Breitbart story. And then also from the Jerusalem Post, those recognizing a Palestinian state can't even tell you where it is. That's from Marco Rubio. Great statement, Marco. And then again, this is timing, timing, timing. Experts unearth rare coin from the time of the Jewish Revolt near Jerusalem's Temple Mount. This is from YNET News. This is right before the anniversary of the destruction of the first and second temple. Reminder by God. The temples were both destroyed, both predicted they would be destroyed. Jeremiah the prophet talked about that in his day. Jesus talked about it in his day. And the fact that they have been destroyed shows that God is in control of all things. People rebelled against God, and they paid the price for it. We know a third temple will be built someday. We've talked about it in Unbelief of Jesus. We deal with this in our book, The Jews, Jerusalem, and the Coming Temple. As always, a free download from our website, Educating Our World, under the heading of Bible prophecy. So a lot going on as always. So let's get to it. Headline number one, Israel and U.S. are now aligning on comprehensive Gaza plan, including release of all hostages, not a partial ceasefire, from the Times of Israel. As negotiations with Hamas stall, Israel and the United States are now aligned on aiming for a comprehensive framework in place of a partial ceasefire and hostage release deal, an unnamed senior Israeli official tells Hebrew media outlets. There is an emerging understanding between Israel and the United States that in light of Hamas's refusal, we must shift from a framework for the release of some of the hostages to a framework for the release of all of the hostages, the disarmament of Hamas, and the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, the official is quoted as saying. There will be no more partial deals, they added. Well, let's hope that's the truth. There is a breakdown in contacts. Hamas has cut off communication, the official said. There's no one to talk to on the other side. This is also Steve Witkoff's understanding, the U.S. Special Envoy. The official also knows that Jerusalem and Washington will work to increase humanitarian aid while continuing to fight the fighting in Gaza. But this is huge news if they follow through with this. In other words, look, let's get the show on the road. End it once and for all. No more partial deals, no more 60-day ceasefire where Hamas can regroup. They're not even talking. Hamas is saying, as we said earlier today, they're a freeze on talking because Israel is not giving the humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza like they're supposed to. And the world keeps, country after country keeps lining up for a Palestinian state to support them all. So why in the world would they, do a ceasefire? Why would they stop? Why would they disarm? Why would they leave? There's no reason for them to do it. So Israel and the U.S. must take the bull by the proverbial horns and get the job done. All right, headline number two. Hamas cuts off contact, escalation in Gaza likely unavoidable. From the Israeli official tells the Jerusalem Post, not likely unavoidable. Another official familiar with the talks told the Post that Hamas has also partially severed ties with Qatar and Egypt. There is growing pessimism in Israel over the possibility that Hamas will show flexibility and return to the negotiating table. This is ridiculous. An Israeli source told the Jerusalem Post on Thursday. There's no talks, there's no flexibility. Hamas is just been playing you people. An Israeli official added the feeling within the government is that the talks are nearing collapse. They've been collapsed for a long time, people. It seems that an expanded military operation in Gaza is inevitable. Hamas has cut off contact. There are no real negotiations with them, so one Israeli source. Another official familiar with the talks told the Post that Hamas had also partially severed ties with Qatar and Egypt. At the moment, they're primarily engaged in talks with Turkey, of all people. Netanyahu and the U.S. envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, met on Thursday for nearly 3 hours. An Israeli official told the Post that part of the meeting was held privately, one-on-one, and the rest included a broader discussion with Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer, Foreign Minister Gideon Saar, and other officials. Following the extended meeting, an Israeli official told the Post that the U.S. and Israel are aligned on their next steps against Hamas and the terror group contact, the fact they've cut contact. There was one story. This is amazing. And one of the Israeli periodicals says, well, Witkoff is going to probably uh, impress on Israel and pressure Israel to make more, s- basically, what do you call it? Giving in. Just make more, not sanctions against Israel, but just Israel just stop arguing for what they've been arguing and just give up. In other words, cut back on all your demands. Well, hopefully that's not the case. Again, a lot of these stories that come out and say things like that, Israel's going to supposed to stop saying what they've been saying all along, and to get a deal, we'll have to compromise again, make more compromise on our demands. That's ridiculous. So anyway, we'll see what happens. So the humanitarian situation in Gaza, Envoy Witkoff is expected to visit the humanitarian centers in the Gaza Strip, intends to make sure there's no famine or deliberate starvation, an Israeli official told the Post. Trump posted on his social media platform on Thursday, the fastest way to end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is for Hamas to surrender and release the hostages. Isn't that the truth? But it isn't going to happen. Sadly, it's not going to happen. Hamas continues to play Israel. The next step should be intensified until there's nothing left of Hamas. Otherwise, any end to the war with Israel compromising their convictions here, Hamas will only stay intact and invites another October 7th somewhere down the line. They've got to finish the job. How often we've been saying this, how long we've been saying this. There's people interesting and various websites have been writing about this and talk about like we have for at least a year or so. It says you got to get the job done. You can't keep doing this, negotiating this. They're not serious about it. They're never going to release the hostages, and they haven't. All right, headline number three, Trump slaps sanctions on Palestinian Authority, blocks officials from traveling to UN for Palestinian state. This is a Breitbart story. President Trump's administration slapped sanctions on the Palestinian Authority and the PLO for seeking statehood outside of a formal agreement with the U.S. per U.S. law. Love it. It has been America's policy for decades, enshrined in the Middle East Peace Commitments Act and other laws, that Palestinians must honor agreements and negotiate with Israel and not pursue unilateral actions, which they are doing. However, the Palestinian Authority has repeatedly broken its agreements by trying to isolate Israel through international institutions and by seeking unilateral recognition of Palestinian statehood through these same institutions. This week and last week, France, the UK, and Canada all announced plans to recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly in September in New York City. President Trump called that a recognition as a reward for terror and has threatened to retaliate by punishing Canada in trade negotiations. Now his administration is sanctioning the Palestinians as well. So the result of this, they will not be able to attend the opening of the United Nations General Assembly, where the Declaration of Statehood was expected. Sorry, guys, you're not invited to the parties. That's really interesting. Good for Donald Trump for doing that. Okay. I love this next story. Those recognizing a Palestinian state can't even tell you where it is. This is from Marco Rubio. I love Marco from, again, Jerusalem Post. At the end of the day, Hamas is sitting there saying, we're winning the PR war. We've got all these countries lining up on our side of this argument. Isn't that the truth? And it's so pathetic. They can't tell you who will govern it. And I think number three, it's counterproductive, Rubio said. He called the decisions irrelevant, like the declaration of a unilaterally of a Palestinian state, that it doesn't mean anything. He says, first of all, none of these countries have the ability to create a Palestinian state. There can be no Palestinian state unless Israel agrees to it. He likened supporting Palestinian statehood to being on the same side as Hamas, adding that would be a reward to the terror group. At the end of the day, the Hamas side is the Palestinian statehood side. Rubio also said Hamas is emboldened to hurt the ceasefire hostage talks with these declarations. If Hamas refuses to agree to a ceasefire, it guarantees a Palestinian state will be recognized by all those countries in September. He added how the declarations are so clumsy here. At the end of the day, Hamas is sitting there saying, we're winning the PR war. We've got all these countries lining up on our side of the argument. We've got leverage now. We shouldn't agree to anything. We should keep this thing going. Way to go, Marco Zago. We've been saying, why in the world would they negotiate? Why in the world would they give in anything when everything is lining up behind them? The countries of the world are basically opening the door for, laying out the red carpet for a Palestinian state. That's how. They don't care about how many people die in Gaza, and they've got hostages they think is their shield, and now they've got all these countries sort of lining up on their side. Rubio continued. He added that he wished there would be no more international attention paid. He wished there would be more international attention paid to the Israeli hostages still in Hamas captivity. They seem to forget it. And so many people, it's even some American politicians are sort of rewriting the October 7th, 2023 story. They're forgetting how horrific it was, what these people did, who they are, what they're planning to do. And remember, too, Hamas is an arm of Iran. They're one of its surrogates. And Iran has made very clear they not only wanted to destroy Israel, they want to destroy us, too, the United States of America. And speaking of destroying, what a perfect timing for this. Headline number 5. This is from YNET. Experts unearth rare coin from the time of the Jewish Revolt near Jerusalem's Temple Mount. Days before Tisha B'Av, of course, is the yearly reminder of the destruction of the first and second temple that Israelis believe, Jews believe it. They both happened on the same day of the Israeli calendar, the 9th of Av. Days before this, archaeologists uncover a coin dating from 69 to 70 AD, minted by Jewish rebels during the final year of the Great Revolt, bearing the inscription for the redemption of Zion. Archaeologists have covered this rare bronze coin minted by these rebels during the final year before the Roman destruction of the Second Temple in AD 70. Israeli Antiquities announced on Wednesday. The coin found during excavations in the Jerusalem Archeological Garden near the southwest corner of the Temple Mount bears the ancient Hebrew inscription for the redemption of Zion, reflecting the desperate hopes of Jewish rebels during the fourth year of the Great Revolt against the Roman rule. In AD 66 is when the revolt started, very famous action. They destroyed one of the Roman legions, that is the Jews, and the revolt led the Roman army to come to Jerusalem and eventually destroy the city and the temple. The coin is a moving testimony of the Jewish spirit just months before Jerusalem's fall, said Rallo Melit, an archaeologist with the Israelis Antiquity Authority, finding it days before Tisha B'Av, the Jewish day of mourning for the temple's destruction, feels deeply symbolic. And that is symbolic because the Lord continues to remind us. The first temple, the second temple were both destroyed. They were predicted to be destroyed ahead of time by God's prophets. First of all, Jeremiah the prophet, the first temple, and second, God the Son, who is also a prophet, Jesus Christ, predicted the destruction of the second temple that happened in AD 70. And so every time Tisha B'Av rolls around, we're reminded the sadness of the temple being destroyed, but the sadness is there, and the people were rebelling against God. God had no choice but to destroy the city and the temple, not once, but twice. And there'll be a third temple built, and this one we know will be built in unbelief of Jesus down the line, called the Tribulation Temple. And again, in our book, The Jews, Jerusalem, the Coming Temple, we go into great detail about this. And also in our book, 25 Signs, we're near the end. Sign number 8, the preparations are being made now to build a third temple. So we talk about that in great detail, what's going on, as well as what the Bible says. So, never a dull moment, much taking place. It looks like Israel will finally, hopefully, do something and finally realize, yeah, I guess the Palestinians, I guess Hamas are not going to ever agree to anything. We might as well do something else. Yeah, it's about time. So let's see what happens. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.